Good afternoon, and thanks for inviting here. I'm Ashish Verma, Vice President Data Technology in DBS Bank. I'm handling data loss protection. Along with that, I'm AI and data practitioner. I would like to welcome Kevin from JPMorgan. He is Managing Director in APAC region, CISO. And along with that, my friend Thao from Thoughtworks. She's head of enterprise modernization, platform and cloud. So I'd like to request Thao to just give some insight about what the work she's doing in the Thoughtworks.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Thao. I joined the financial industry in the technology domain about 18 years ago. And after about 6 or 7 years, I joined Thoughtworks. So I joined Thoughtworks about 12 years ago as a developer. And I have done lots of different cloud migration, modernization engagements. And then now I'm currently leading the enterprise modernization platforms and cloud division at Thoughtworks in Southeast Asia. Really great to be here and hoping to share some insights and hoping to hear from you guys as well.
Kevin, about you, can you please share your insights?
Yeah, hi. So delighted to be here today. My name's Kevin O'Leary. I've worked for JPMorgan at the moment, but actually I'm only been working in the financial sector for about 3 years. I've actually worked in a lot of different industries, always in cybersecurity. So I started in cybersecurity. We were talking actually before we came on stage about our various backgrounds. And I started working in cybersecurity in, I said 2000, it was actually 1999. So I've actually watched the birth of the cybersecurity industry because, back in 1999, obviously there were some cybersecurity products, but there weren't really many CISOs. There wasn't really a cybersecurity industry. So just watching it develop over the course of my career, and then obviously trying to keep pace with technological change, and cloud obviously really taking off about 15 years ago, and seeing where we are now and how cloud is being adopted. So, while my job is I'd say covers a wide variety of technology at various stages of its development, right from that long tail of legacy systems that are still hanging around. I remember when I started in cyber, there was still a lot of mainframe computing around in a lot of manufacturing processes and the rest. And even today, you'll still find in some corners of banking, there are still mainframes that, while it may have been updated, they were certainly designed sometime in the 1970s. So I don't go back that far in terms of my career, but certainly that legacy and how that's developing into cloud is a fascinating part of what we have to deal with on a daily basis when it comes to cybersecurity and cloud.
Yeah, thanks. So I can say, I think you started journey way back 22 years. During that time, there was no rule book for CISO. So, yeah.
Exactly.
So I think in the current era where the adoption of cloud is increasing day by day, and then more and more companies are moving towards the modernization. So along with that, because there are like hybrid approach also the companies are following, and then it will also increase the cybersecurity concern to the company. So let us start our Fireside Chat, cloud and cybersecurity, which is a very important pillar of technology. I can say here it's Singapore, but I can say it will be an important technology pillar for all the industry, including BFSI. So as you came from the application modernization, enterprise modernization, for you, banks are going on a lot of modernization journey. Many banks have a large legacy system. So what are the common challenges that you are facing and you can see here in your journey?
Definitely. I think certainly, like what Kevin mentioned, right? You do have a lot of legacy systems sitting in all sorts of different corners in a banking organization. And what I've seen, some of the key challenges, I could talk about it all day, but I'm going to just cut it down to some high-level ones. So I think the very first one is around when you decide to move to the cloud, really have an idea of what kind of business objectives or goals that you want to achieve before you decide. Because I've seen with our clients in Thoughtworks is that sometimes we go in, we get engaged by an IT organization that says, I want to move everything to the cloud. And to me, that is not a strategy. A strategy is my business needs to expand to multiple different regions in loans or in insurance. And so therefore, I need to move to the cloud in order to achieve this, and then have a strategy of how you move to the cloud. So for me, that challenge comes when there is no alignment between business and technology. And again, as a symptom of that, right, many things come out of it. For example, you get very piecemeal migration. So you've got one application moving to the cloud, disjointedly, another application moving to the cloud, and it becomes very hard to manage. And when you have piecemeal applications moving to cloud that way, first of all, there is no opportunity for you to consolidate. The idea is that when you think of a cloud movement, it is a multi-year journey, and it takes buy-in from the business, it takes planning from IT, thinking about what part of your portfolio needs to be lift and shift, what part needs to be re-architected to leverage that cloud capability. And so, so for me, that is the true strategy that you need to think about. And then start small, and then start, and the other thing is always come in with your business measures, right? So as you move to the cloud, how are you helping the business to achieve that objective? Are you helping them in faster turnaround? Are you helping them in catering for more load, more customers? Those are the questions that we should always ask ourselves. And again, constant measurement beyond just the IT measurement in terms of cloud costs is what, in combination, can then help you demonstrate the value of moving to the cloud. The other challenge that I see is around, I think a lot of organizations comes in and say, this is a technology modernization, but it is actually not. Because when you move to the cloud, you no longer deal with your infrastructure, you no longer own the infrastructure. So therefore, that capability that you need to build is very different. It's no longer hardware and networking capabilities anymore. You are looking at managing cloud services, and that's a very different skill set and different operating model as well. So it is a technology, capability, people, and structure of the organization that the teams need to be thinking about. Because often I see organizations moving to the cloud and literally just replicating whatever that they have into the cloud. And that becomes a lift and shift, and you then see, you still see bottlenecks. You don't see your applications being able to scale as, the promise of the move to the cloud. That's because they haven't been thought about in terms of re-architecting the whole processes of ticket-based IT servicing is still there when you should be looking at the more self-service and the more enabling the team to be more autonomous while leveraging the cloud. So I'll pause there. Those are some of the key challenges that I see. Yeah.
Sorry, Ashish, I was just going to say there's some very interesting things you brought up, and I think they might actually filter into some of the questions that might come up from the cyber side. But it just struck me of what you were describing there. Would you say that that the best approach would be to take a modular approach in terms of your IT infrastructure? So, like when we talk about applications moving into the cloud, really we were talking about our workloads rather than applications, because it's not just one application. It's usually an infrastructure or an ecosystem, right?
Absolutely.
So maybe it's about targeting the parts of your ecosystem that could take advantage of the compute power of cloud rather than just shifting them into the cloud as if it was a traditional data center.
Absolutely, I completely, and I think that's where I feel like it should, like what you rightly call out, it should be done in a more modular way. But before you even kick off that modular journey, you need to think about what is your overall strategy? What part of your portfolio is going to be okay with lift and shifts? Because sometimes lift and shifts work. And then what part needs to be re-architected, like you say, right? How can you make your application stateless so that you can scale horizontally? And so those are the things that, the strategies that you need to work toward.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, based on my experience, because the kind of data loss protection project I'm handling, there are also the similar challenges which we are facing. The time of when we are doing the transformation from on-prem to cloud. So the challenge is that the data which we are making or are doing or like wrapping or encrypted in the encrypted manner which we are using the on-prem, how we can unencrypt into the cloud, because the kind of system we are using in both the scenarios is different actually. Okay, so Kevin, over to you. What is the biggest cybersecurity threat that is BFSI industries facing?
So I think it's kind of an interesting question when you think about it, because as I said in my past, I've worked in a lot of different industries, and certainly I've seen cloud develop in all of those industries. I worked for General Electric, and obviously they were trying to develop an industrialized cloud, and within them there were aspects of aviation, healthcare, etc. And everybody says, what's the particular threat to my particular industry from cloud? As if there was some uniqueness from that, when actually you're still talking about IT systems. So in actual fact, I don't think there's any special sauce when it comes to a particular cyber threat. It's a cloud issue, and it's an IT infrastructure, and it's an IT issue primarily. And the biggest questions that companies have to deal with are still the same as they were 15 years ago, which is understanding that shared security model. Excuse me. Bit of a frog in my throat, excuse me. So working through that shared security model and understanding the responsibilities within that, because it's a bit of a misnomer. When people talked about shared security, it was a way for cloud companies to absolve themselves of some responsibilities when it came to securing data and applications in the cloud. So what's really important is that whichever cloud provider that you choose, that you have a very strong understanding of how they are managing the boundary and how you are operating within their cloud. Because, and I don't want to use it too much as an analogy, because in actual fact, if you're using cloud correctly, it shouldn't just be a virtual data center. But that image is still something that we should consider. If you think about a traditional bricks and mortar data center, that DC, if you're co-located, they look after all the physical security, they look after the cage, they look after the cabling into the facility. But once you're in the cage, that's your responsibility. Right? So cloud operates very much in the same way. When you bring it into the compute power of cloud and you start talking about Kubernetes and you talk about containers and serverless, all of these things that could be used primarily for mobile applications. We saw the gentleman who was speaking beforehand, for Alipay, they are heavily containerized and would use a lot of serverless workloads in the cloud because that provides efficiency. The one thing about those elements is I'm not sure that we've actually developed a security approach to those parts of compute power within the cloud. And I think that's the biggest risk, is this kind of where the technology almost runs ahead of what we're able to secure. So I think we're still in that kind of gray zone. There are plenty of cloud security companies who say they can secure it, and I'm sure that they can in their own way. But we're back into an area where we've seen some consolidation in the EDR space, primarily around companies like CrowdStrike and Palo Alto Networks, etc. But if you think about cybersecurity in general, a lot of the cloud security providers are very dispersed, and you're looking at maybe niche boutique players in certain aspects of cybersecurity. And I think that fragmentation is a real problem and is a real risk. So if I'm thinking about it in terms of threats, I think it's the same across the board for everybody. When I think about for technology and the use of compute power, that fragmentation of technology to manage the risk across containers and Kubernetes, serverless, etc., I think that is an issue in and of itself. The one thing I would say in terms of the financial industry and what regulators are looking at very closely are risks about concentration risk, exit plans, etc. Because if you're going to use public cloud and you're concentrating on just one provider, that in itself is a very obvious and logical risk. They also want to say that even if you don't have a risk in the immediate, how do you back out of a particular issue that you have with a certain provider? So being able to have those exit plans. So if I was looking at it and just taking the wider problem, I could go on all day, and I've probably gone on too long already. But if you're trying to form an approach from a cybersecurity perspective, I think it's really about understanding how you're going to use the cloud, what compute power you're looking at the best in breed, or not even the best in breed, in fact, that's probably the worst way to look at it, but look at applications that can work together in an ecosystem to manage all of that compute power across the cloud. And then thirdly, being very clear on how you're going to manage concentration risk and exit plans.
Thanks, Kevin.
Can I just add something on that? Because I think you mentioned something very interesting, is that I think the security aspect now has become a shared responsibility, right? You're relying on the cloud to do, on the cloud service provider to do that security of their hardware, of the things that they give you, the compute power, like what you rightly call out. And then it's still up to us to think about your application security, your attack exposure, and so on. And then one of the things that I really think about that I've seen in a lot of our clients and we strongly advocate for is around how can you bring that security mindset left? How can you bring that into your whole application development process? Starting from the analysis phase, if you're going to be creating a feature, what are the security exposures or risks that that feature might expose? How do you mitigate and how do you bake that into the code? Are the developers thinking about it? Are they bringing that into the code? And how do we automate those testing of those features? For example, if data encryption, data at rest needs to be there, are the developers setting up the databases or setting up their access for that to ensure that data encryption? Have they got tests to demonstrate that? And then being able to automatically run all of these to make sure that subsequent code changes don't break these kind of requirements, right? So I would say that, as an approach like what Kevin mentioned, beyond all of the very high level exit strategy and so on, also think about how do you bring that security mindset closer to your team, bring it forward, and that will definitely save you a lot of time at the end. Because often, especially in the BFSI industry, where we have so much compliance and regulation to meet, by the time you finish developing an application, even though, be it on the cloud, be it on-prem, that time that it takes for security testing, compliance testing could be months. And if you can bring that pain forward and think about it up front, the cost of rework will be much more optimized and minimized. And hopefully that journey of going to production faster and more frequently can help. And then having that, everybody thinking about it beyond just the security team, but your developer, your business analysis team as well. So for me, that's another good approach to consider.
Yes. So Kevin, for you, as we are shifting from on-prem to cloud, so how do we make sure the data should be secure in the cloud space? What are the best practices you?
So, fortunately, well, depending on how you look at it, right? So, certainly here within Singapore, the regulators have been very open to public cloud and the use of public cloud. And if I think about across all of the different areas of the region that we have to look for approvals, Singapore is probably the easiest. So it's probably the best example in some ways and the worst example in some ways, right? Because if I think of outside of Singapore and look at the other jurisdictions, they're very reticent in terms of how companies can use core banking or put core banking applications into the cloud. They're fine with productivity. They're fine with Office 365 or email or all the stuff that we need to use to function. That could all be cloud-based. There's no issues. But if we start talking about our trader applications or a market analysis, etc., or anything that's holding client data, they're quite reticent on that still. Except here in Singapore, they want to know what we're doing, but they're not necessarily getting involved in terms of stopping us from doing it. I think it really is a question of a few different areas that go actually beyond cybersecurity. So if you're thinking about how would you manage that data from a cybersecurity infrastructure and planning perspective, you really need to think of it in terms of zero trust. Like if you're going to the public cloud, you're essentially moving into an untrusted domain. So if you're going to operate within an untrusted domain and take that information and move data between there and your trusted domain within your organization, you must be following zero trust principles. And that means in terms of, not looking at it, it's not just the movement of data across the boundary using encryption. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Really, it's about understanding that once you have that data residing in the cloud, how do you manage it within there? And applying those kind of zero trust principles is extremely important, right? And I think that's really at a top level, that's kind of the basic strategic approach to take, is to understand that, even though your stuff is in the cloud, it's now in an untrusted domain, and I think that's really the core of
Thanks. So, Thao, for you, what are the better handling and preventive cyber threats?
What are the better handling of cyber threats? I think there's multiple different approaches, but I think, like I mentioned earlier, bringing that mindset, the thinking of that security mindset and thinking forward to everyone who's involved in the whole software development supply chain, right? So having that, because at any one point in time, if no one is thinking about it, that is your weakest link, right? Your system is as good as your weakest link, so that therefore your whole supply chain, even the third-party systems that you are dependent on, you are also being exposed. So then, how do you ensure that, ensuring that, making sure that they are compliant to whatever that you need the security level to be. And then beyond that, how do you develop your system? I talked about bringing security forward. And then beyond that, there's many different approaches that you can then put in. So beyond security, there's integrity of your systems in the cloud. If something goes down, can your system still operate in the right way? There's chaos testing as an approach where you can intermittently bring down your systems while in operation and ensuring that as components go down and back up again, your data integrity is still intact. You're not inadvertently exposing something to the cloud. And then there's red teaming as another approach for you to think about in terms of just constantly having some kind of continuous scanning or having teams really trying to break your systems and then proactively identify the opportunity to improve.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, again, it's great because you're sparking some ideas as you talk, which
Yeah,
is exactly what we're looking for. One of the concepts that I'm sure you're all aware of, and it's not just in the financial industry, but essentially this thought of repaving your applications and your systems almost on a weekly basis, right? And what we find in the legacy world is that, for legacy systems, some you're able to repave, others you can't because of a whole variety of functions and steps that you have to take if you're going to actually repave. Once your applications are properly cloud, I'd say properly cloud enabled, right? So not just treating cloud as if it was a virtual data center, but you have actually taken the step of making your applications cloud native. That means that by default, repaving your whole estate should be extremely straightforward as long as you're managing the data at the same time, right? So you have to be very careful in terms of how you're storing data, et cetera, so that you're not wiping anything. But this whole idea of repaving on a weekly basis to stop configuration drift and to deal with any vulnerabilities, there's huge advantages to be able to leverage cloud for that. So I think it's we're not just talking about the problems of cloud, we're also talking about the advantages of cloud when it comes to cyber risk.
So Kevin, to you again, what is the role of AI/ML in controlling this cybersecurity threats?
Yeah, so it's kind of very much in the news at the moment. I think we're nowhere near understanding exactly how or where we can apply AI, especially OpenAI, generative AI within cloud in general. I mean, obviously we think about it in terms of the speed of development, et cetera, but I think there are still some issues with AI. If anybody's played around with ChatGPT or any of the others, just try and ask it some questions about yourself and see how wrong it can be, right? So, it is definitely a work in progress. I actually think that the risk that I see an emerging threat that's most important that we have to keep a very close eye on is actually quantum computing. because if we think about quantum computing, once we hit a phase, now, depending who you talk to, people will say quantum computing still doesn't exist, and you say the others, well, no, actually it does, because some firms have got it working, etc. We haven't actually seen it yet, right? No matter what people are talking about, we haven't seen it in operation. But one thing is true, that if we get to true quantum computing, that means that all of our encryption is going to be at risk from day one, right? So what we should be looking at now, and this is in general, but it applies especially for anything that we're exposing to public cloud, we need to be looking at encryption that is quantum ready, right? So even though quantum computing isn't here yet, the algorithms and the ability to create encryption to deal with quantum and to protect against decryption enabled by quantum, that does exist. So it's really important, and it's something that I know that banks in general, JPMorgan being one of them, but plenty, are investing heavily in this kind of quantum-ready encryption at the next level, and putting that in place now, because within the next, depending who you talk to, next 4, 5, 6 years, we will be at a stage of quantum computing. Now, one thing I would say on that, because it does feed back into the dangers of AI, if you look at generative AI, right now it's not ready, but if you think about its ability to kind of fix itself and actually improve itself, and if you plug that into the development of quantum, you could see that, you know, the 5-year scale might come very, very quickly, in fact, and we might be talking this time next year, we might be talking about the first quantum computers. So I think that the way that development is speeding up exponentially, I think that's the biggest risk we have at the moment. So I would urge everybody, if you have any influence over your organization, they should be investing in quantum-ready encryption, essentially.
So some time back when we were sitting there and we're talking about the enterprise version of ChatGPT. So do you feel this is a reality, or it's just another buzzword?
Yeah, I can see some possibilities and some use cases that need to be developed, and I think being able to do it in-house is something that's going to be very useful once that's enabled for companies around the world, because the biggest problem is information leaking into generative AI that can be then used by everybody because it's self-learning and it's picking up all of the inputs. So we have to be very careful about how we use that. If we have that internally, we can see more use cases and development happening there for sure.
Thanks. What about you? Thao?
So I think completely agree with you on the generative AI part. And maybe just something to add on, I'm thinking that, you know, the role of data and AI in helping to detect anomaly is definitely advancing. So I've seen cases where, you know, in our clients where they have leveraged the whole predictive AI to be able to analyze logs, detect fraud, and also analyze network traffic to detect data breaches and so on. So those are some, I guess, some more of the cases that we can definitely leverage, and it's definitely, I think it's advancing because from what we've seen, from what I've seen the cases, they are false positives, but, you know, at least they are flagging stuff up, and people need to take that seriously, and you know, it's obviously cutting out a lot of the pain if you were to do it yourself.
So
Yeah,
just in order to check on the time, I think it's like, what is the summarization from your side? Okay.
I was going to sum up very quickly, and I want to make sure I give Thao some time, so I'm not going to suck it all up. Essentially, you know, when you think about BFSI and you think about, you know, the financial industry in general and how cloud is applied, from an IT perspective, I don't see that there are any greater risks because it's a financial industry. I don't think that is the problem. I think the regulatory side and how we can demonstrate transparently to regulators how we manage data in the cloud, I think that is quite unique in terms of the data oversight that we have to deal with. So I think that as you construct your strategies and you think about the technologies, you have to think about what's going to be, you know, that's able to deal with that regulatory oversight and to do it in a transparent way, essentially.
What about you? What is the summarization notes from you?
I won't summarize on the cybersecurity because Kevin's done it really well. I would just say in terms of the cloud modernization journey, when you think about moving to the cloud, really have a strategy on how you move to the cloud, what kind of business outcomes you want to achieve, and really orient around that. And then start small and constantly measure and pivot. So that would be my parting word. And I could talk a lot more, so feel free to catch up with me afterward if you want to discuss further.
Thanks, Thao, and thanks, Kevin.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.